Welcome and thank you for checking in at the Inner Game of Change podcast, where I focus on exploring the multi-layers of managing change. My guests cover a diverse number of critical topics to enable effective and sustainable change in the workplace. My name is Ali Juma, and you're listening to the Inner Game of Change podcast. My guest today is Matt Abrams, communication professor at Stanford University, international public speaker, author, and a fellow podcaster. A regular TED speaker and a widely sought-after communication guru, Matt's core work focuses on uncovering the essence of effective communication and public speaking. Today, Matt shares his thoughts on best ways to communicate change in the workplace. I am grateful to have Matt chatting to me today. So Matt, thank you so much for your time and welcome to the Inner Game of Change podcast. I am eternally grateful to have you with me today.
I am super thrilled to be here and look forward to our conversation. Thank you so much.
Fabulous. Today's topic is about communication. Before we dive deep into the topic, it will be fantastic to introduce yourself to my audience, Matt.
Sure thing. So I am a professor of communication at Stanford's Graduate School of Business. I teach strategic communication, have done so for over a decade. And I am very passionate about helping people to better communicate in a confident, clear, and compelling manner. And I do that not just at the business school at Stanford, but I also run a consulting practice. And I curate a website called No Freaking Speaking, where there are lots of videos of me and other things. And my biggest pleasure is hosting a podcast, much like you do. It's called Think Fast, Talk Smart, where again, all we do is talk about communication. So every aspect of my life is trying to help people feel better about their communication, because at the end of the day, I think everybody has really valuable things to contribute, and we need to make sure that we hear everybody's voice and everybody has to be confident presenting their ideas.
And I listened and I watched quite a few of your YouTube videos and TED Talks, and I really love them and really worthwhile. And we're going to put the links to all of your material on our podcast. I am a fan of your podcast. And
thank you.
It gives me a lot of ideas and to think and take my communication seriously as well and have fun with it at the same time. I want to get into the topic very quickly. So communication. It is a critical element in the workplace, Matt. Why do you think that is?
It's the way we get things done. It's the way we connect. It's the way we share ideas, collaborate, brainstorm ideas. Communication is the connective tissue of humanity, but especially at work. And I think all of us really realized the importance of communication during the pandemic, when many of the channels through which we normally communicate disappeared. And we saw how critical and important it was to being successful, not just at work, but just to connect with other people as we were isolated. And I know you in Melbourne and in other places in Australia were locked down more than many of us who were also locked down. Yes. So this notion of connection, of sharing ideas, collaborating, brainstorming ideas is critical. And communication is the way we do it.
Do you think the workplace today pays a lot of attention to effective communication?
So it depends on what you mean by pays attention to. Certainly, effective communication is rewarded. Ineffective communication is punished. We see that in how some businesses are succeeding in terms of growing, in terms of capturing market. And we see how others are being penalized when they can't communicate well. And within an organization, those who communicate well often get their ideas heard and talked about and supported. So, yeah, I think businesses reward and punish communication. Do they pay attention? Some do. I have a consulting practice where I go in and help people to get better, but others see communication as just a necessary evil, and those companies struggle at some point. So I think people need to pay more attention to it for sure.
I do find it interesting and curious that many organizations have a specific department called the communication department. And
it is interesting. Yeah. I mean, what they really mean is those departments look after very specific audiences, right? Yes. But I think everybody should be in the communication department.
Absolutely.
That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Effective communication, how does it impact culture?
Communication impacts culture in two primary ways. It's the mechanism and modality through which culture is transferred. We communicate our culture through the words we use, through the actions we take. And in turn, communication therefore defines the culture. So what we do, who we pay attention to, whose voices get listened to, all of that helps define our culture. So it not only is the way through which we transmit culture, it is the way we reinforce and build our culture. So communication and culture are intimately related. I personally believe you can't have one without the other.
Yes. I want to ask you, Matt, about, is there a structure you want to share with us that can help us communicate with maximum meaning?
Oh, you've set me up so well. Thank you. Thank you. That's a great question, because I think I know what you want me to say, and I'd love to say it because I say it all the time. But before I do, I just want to take a step back. What helps make communication effective is if it's clear and concise. And many of us say more than we need to say. And a lot of that is because we're figuring out what we need to say as we're saying it. Mm. Concision, being crisp and clear, is very important. And the way you get to crisp, clear communication is through structure. We've all listened to people who ramble on and on. It's not fun. It's difficult to pay attention to, and it causes us to do a lot of extra work. So structure helps. To me, structure is just a logical connection of information. We call those stories, right? Stories are nothing more than logical connections. Yes. I know you have a history of studying stories, and my favorite structure of all structures is three simple questions. What? So what? Now what? I believe this structure can be used in so many ways to communicate information. The what is your idea, your belief, your product, your process, your service, whatever it is you're communicating. That's the what. The so what is, why is it important and relevant to the person that you're speaking to? And then finally, the now what is, what comes next? Is it, let me show you a demo. Let's set up another meeting. Let's sign on the dotted line. So it's a structure that has not only relevance built in, and we know from lots of research in psychology and other fields that relevance is what gets people to pay attention. And it also has momentum, which leads us to feel as if we are making progress. So what, now what is a fantastic way to get your information across. And I encourage everybody to think about, when you write, when you speak, when you give feedback, when you answer questions, to leverage that structure. If you'll allow me just one, I have a big smile on my face. I want to take what I call a meta moment, not meta as in Facebook, but to really look at what just transpired. I actually defined the what, so what, now what structure by using what, so what, now what. I told you what it was, yes, why it was important, encouraged you to use it. So it's a fantastic way, I believe, to package information.
So is it true that the first time I heard you talking about the what, so what, now what, which I apply a lot in my change practice when I talk about change. I think about it this way, Matt, is that the what talks to the head, so what talks to the heart, and the why, and now what is the action, which is the hand. And
I like the physical analogy, relating it to the body. That's great.
Yes, and I'm thinking, maybe if we tackle it that way, to talk to the heart, to the head, the heart, and the hands, maybe there's more likelihood that we're going to get impact and we're going to get action from the audience.
I think that's wonderful. And I agree. If you think about those three elements, you really increase the likelihood that you're going to be impactful in your communication and have the magic F word of all communication. It's not the naughty one some people think. It's all about fidelity. It's about accuracy and clarity. And if you look at it the way you're talking about it, then you absolutely will increase fidelity.
There's something else that I want to talk to you about, which is what we call cognitive dissonance. And I think you touched lightly on it just earlier. What are the things that we need to consider to actually minimize that dissonance?
So if by dissonance you mean things that get in the way of people's communication,
absolutely,
there are lots of points of resistance, and really understanding what motivates people and their decisions and the way they view the world is really, really important. The number one point made across my 50 plus episodes on the podcast I do, which is all about communication, the number one point most repeated by the variety of guests I've had is that you have to know your audience. You need to understand your audience, tailor your messages to them. Part of that is really understanding where are the areas of resistance or concern that your audience has. Is it that it costs too much money, takes too much time, requires too much change? What are those issues? And then in your communication, you need to address and respect those. It might be as simple as getting people to imagine what's possible. Some of the most powerful language that you can use to motivate change is to say something like, imagine what it would be like, or what if we could? Those phrases get people to envision what's possible. And if you can hook them on what's possible, you can then get agreement on steps that need to be done. So it starts by understanding who you're talking to. And then you have to think about how do you frame and structure your messages to help you accomplish your goal.
Yes. I was thinking the other day, which one works better? Is it the written word? Is it the spoken word? Or is it the visual word? What's your insight on it?
Well, I think a combination is obviously the best, but I really think here again, we have to understand who we're talking to.
Yes.
So for people of our vintage, if you will, and I think I'm probably older than you, I think there's something very powerful about the written word and the spoken word. I look at my children, I have 2 teenagers, and it's all about visual. And so you need to understand who you're speaking to. And much like the advice I give when I talk about how you support claims that you make, and you have to use not just data, but you have to use stories and testimonials. I think when you're trying to be effective, you have to cast a wide net. So using language, written and spoken, using visuals combined together have more impact.
Matt, have you noticed in the era of COVID and the remote work, have you noticed that we needed to adjust our communication style because we're working remotely?
We absolutely have had to, and people have really struggled. We lose a lot of the cues and clues that we rely on. We lose the immediacy. That's what we academics call the reactions that we can see. And so people have had to adjust, and you've had to adjust in lots of ways. And we've seen some people who do it well. All of us know people who have adopted to the virtual communication culture better than others.
Yes.
And we know those who haven't, but it absolutely has impacted our communication. We have to go out of our way to engage and keep people focused. And we have to go out of our way to gain signals and feedback that people are with us as we go.
I think in one of your speeches, you did mention something called presentation hygiene.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
So does that mean that we need something like that when we do, presentation remotely versus the ones that we do face to face?
Well, I think when I say hygiene, I mean, it's what you do to prepare yourself to communicate. So it's getting a good night's sleep. It's eating a proper diet. It's getting exercise. All of these enhance not just your body, but your mind to help you focus, give you energy. But you also have to have a proper setup. If you were in person, you would dress properly for the occasion. You would make sure that you stand in a certain way, et cetera. The same is true virtually. You need to have good lighting. You need to have a background that doesn't distract. You have to make sure that people can see you. So you're taking up an appropriate amount of the screen. All of that to me is hygiene. And it's just the foundational principles. You can have a great story to tell, but if people can't see and hear you, then you're fighting against yourself. And that's where hygiene comes in.
Yes. And I completely agree. I do see the good and the bad and the ugly. When it comes to remote presentations and some of the basic stuff that really can spoil. Most people pay a lot of attention and actually work very hard on their presentations, but sometimes the small things that can derail the effectiveness of the presentation.
Absolutely. It gets in the way. I like to say the best nonverbal presence is the unnoticed nonverbal presence. So if you start paying attention to somebody's gestures or lighting, it distracts you from what they're saying. It introduces noise, which is the enemy of fidelity.
Yeah. Where do you think, so obviously communication has got the content, has got the timing of it, you understanding your audience. Where does the method of communication, so when do we use visuals, when do we just express the ideas ourselves, does that make a difference in the way we present information?
I think it does. And I think this gets to not only thinking about our audience, as I mentioned earlier, but you also have to think about the expectations of the situation. So what is the corporate culture? What do people expect to see from you? Is it that they expect slides? Is it that they expect a compelling story to start? Organizations and types of communication. I work with a lot of academics who do research. There's an expectation for what an academic presentation will look and sound like. And you have to decide if you want to conform to those expectations or deviate from them. So you have to first and foremost think about what's expected of you and do you want to comply with that. But once you do, I firmly believe that story comes first, and then think about, can slides, visuals, other tools enhance your communication, or do they detract from it? The reality is this: when it comes to slides, people create slides for themselves, not for their audience. They're teleprompters, they're documents they're trying to create to leave behind. They're not making it for their audience in the moment. So create your story first, and then ask yourself, would slides help my audience in the moment better understand what I'm saying? And if the answer is yes, include them. If not, don't.
I do notice nowadays that we are in the age of internet, and we are, there's an avalanche of information every single day, and we get that through our feeds, our social media and everything. And so we're really fighting for focus and attention, right?
Absolutely.
And I always think, how can my presentation, how can I help the audience pay attention to this particular presentation? And so I start thinking of different ways of, as you mentioned, maybe sometimes I don't comply with it, okay, it's going to have to be a PowerPoint presentation. And some people say they don't like PowerPoint, but I do think it's not the PowerPoint, it's how you use it. I'll share with you an example. One day I came across a storytelling technique used by the Japanese called Kamishibai. And Kamishibai is, I sincerely think that PowerPoint has come from that. What they do is a storytelling. Basically, they've got a box, and they've got cards, and then there's a part of the story in each card, and then they just withdraw card after card, and they tell the story. So I actually used that in one of the big retailers here, where in the back of the office there was no screen. So I printed out the slides, and I used the Kamishibai technique, which is basically I take the slide, a piece of paper with a blue tag, and I put it on the wall, and then one by one I put 10 pieces of papers in there, and I told a story. And it worked like a miracle, because they've never seen anybody doing this before. Same PowerPoint, printed format, Kamishibai style.
I love that. It teaches so many things, especially around storytelling. That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that technique. I like it. I might steal it.
Please do. And I'll put actually a link of the Kamishibai, the Japanese storytelling, really basic. I want to talk about something called psychological safety. And I strongly believe that the way we communicate change in the workplace helps us get closer to the change and be curious or run away.
Absolutely. I think the way communication is the main driver of change, for sure. And you have to feel psychologically safe and comfortable in order to want to express your own beliefs and attitudes, to be willing to take risks and be open to what others are saying. So communication plays a central role in establishing psychological safety, and psychological safety helps people communicate better.
Fantastic. Are there any insights that you want to share with the audience around, effective communication when it comes to change. And we have had now, over a couple of years now of going through COVID. And we've seen how the adoption rate of the change is actually, in Australia, we just bringing down the last few walls of restrictions in here, but I understand that the CDC in the States are still putting the mandates. And then they all.
I'm not going to comment on any of that because it keeps changing day by day, and I'm not exactly.
But the idea is that all of these are examples and instances of change.
Yes.
And the way we communicate that plays a major role in whether or not people actually follow suit or adopt the change.
That's absolutely true. I mean, when it comes to change, two things I'd like to say. One, you really have to know your audience and what's important and relevant to them. Often when we try to persuade or influence people, we come from our perspective. Here's what's important for us, but that might not be what's important for the people we're talking to. So you really need to understand what motivates their interests and their behavior. It's not about what you want, it's about what they need. The second piece is whenever you go to persuade or influence somebody, you have two choices to make. You can focus on what are called promoting forces, the things that promote the attitude or behavior you're trying to influence. Or you can focus on what are called restraining forces, the things that prevent somebody from doing what you want them to do. The example I always use to explain this is when my two children were younger, they didn't like to eat their vegetables at all. Couldn't get them to eat their vegetables. My wife has a PhD in psychology. I'm a communication guy. You would think we could get kids to eat vegetables. We couldn't. And the problem was we continually focused on the promoting forces. We said, eat your vegetables, you'll be big and strong. Eat your vegetables, you'll be like your favorite sports heroes. Eat your vegetables, will give you money. None of this worked. Why? They didn't like the way the vegetables looked and tasted. That restraining force was so strong. So it wasn't until we addressed the restraining force, the way the vegetables looked and tasted, that we had any success. And your listeners are going to think this is awful, but when you put ice cream sprinkles on broccoli, you can have an amazing effect on kids' perception of their vegetables.
I will try that, Matt.
But the point is this, that when you go to persuade, you need to understand your audience, and you need to understand is the best place to focus on what's going to motivate people to change or remove the pressures that prevent them from changing. And sometimes it's both, and sometimes it's one or the other. And you have to think about all of that.
And I think about that in terms of a nudge strategy. So through communication, we can nudge somebody to actually take a specific type of action. In fact, in the nudge strategies, there's a strategy called EAST, which stands for make it easy, make it attractive, make it social, which means show that other people are using it, and make it timely.
Oh, I love it. Yes. Nudges are so important.
Yes. So you're talking about the broccoli. What you did, you actually made it attractive. Yeah, and so you're actually removing a restriction, and you've changed the environment. Sometimes changing the environment or changing the structure. And this is not really cheating. This is also understanding sometimes your audience and what drives them as well. You did talk about the structure of communication. Does that mean that if we violate structure around not explaining the why and being really a bit slack and paying attention to the words you're using, is that when we put our spin antenna on and think this is not going to fly?
So, yeah, I mean, you have to be sensitive to how things are framed, and you have to be aware of buzzwords, jargon, et cetera, that might cause people to worry about what you're saying and how you're saying it. And that's really critical for us to all think about, for sure. So I do think that once you have a message structured, you then have to be thinking about how might what I'm saying get people concerned, or as a listener, as a recipient of communication, what are the things that are being said that might make me think that I'm trying to be manipulated or influenced in a way that I might not want to be.
Yeah. Look, the way I think about it as well, Matt, is that we're very good at detecting spin, obviously, but
yes,
and that does come also. Sometimes we do forget that before the message, we need to pay attention to the messenger. So sometimes in the business of change where I play, sometimes we do say that a specific message would need to come from a specific leader rather than somebody else, because that leader's got credibility, he's got history, and he's got relationships with the audience. And therefore, it will be more likely that they will listen to the message rather than trying to understand who this stranger person is.
I think that's a very important point, and I appreciate you sharing it because I agree 100%.
Fantastic. We are coming to the end of the podcast. I'm really enjoying this, and I hope to get you back again at some stage in the future and we tackle another topic, Matt. What would be your advice to the change practitioners like myself in the market when they listen to this podcast?
So my advice would be, first and foremost, always understand who you're trying to persuade. We haven't talked about this, but also what's equally important is understanding what is your goal, having a very clear understanding of what is it you are trying to achieve in the moment, in the short term and long term. And to me, a goal has three parts. It's information, emotion, and action. Most of us focus on, here's what I want to say, the information, but how do you want people to feel? And how can you structure what you want them to do to be clear and actionable? So know your audience, have a clear goal. And then, as we've talked about, apply structure so that message can be clear, crisp, and concise. If you do those three things, I think you're in a good place for influential, persuasive communication.
I love it. Information, emotion, and action. I think that can be your next book, Matt.
I'm already writing my next book, and it's on Think Fast, Talk Smart principles, but maybe the one after that we'll talk about.
Fantastic.
I can only do one at a time. It's hard work.
It's wonderful work, and I wish you the best with the new book. You do have another book, which is available on all major platforms. It's called Speaking Up Without Freaking Out.
Correct. That's right.
Who would be the audience for that book?
Anybody who wants to be more confident and compelling in their communication. So if you're a nervous speaker, it can help you feel less nervous. If you're a comfortable speaker, it can help you feel more comfortable and be more compelling. It's really to help people focus their communication to whatever goal they're trying to achieve.
Fantastic. And we're going to put all the information about all of your work, wonderful work in communication. So please keep doing what you're doing. We love it.
Thank you.
And including the books and the references on YouTube and TED Talks. Any final words, Matt?
Simply to thank you for the opportunity to speak to your audience and to speak with you, and to really applaud you for the work you do, helping people become more influential and successful agents of change in their business and personal lives is really important. So congratulations for the work you do.
Thank you so much, Matt. I really appreciate your time. And until next time, stay well and stay safe.
Well, thank you, sir.
Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode. To know more about our guests and this podcast, check the innergameofchange.com.au website and remember to subscribe. I can't wait to share with you my next podcast guest. Until then, stay well and stay safe.